Hi. Do you ever have experiences where you feel like you're on top of the mountain, where everything's going right, you're getting up early, you're feeling good about yourself? And then do you have times that are the opposite of that, where you feel like you're in a dark valley, where you're under a cloud, where just nothing is going well for you and you just feel like rolling over and staying in bed? Well, sometimes even those of us who believe in God, and those of us like me who have spiritual jobs, we're ministers, we go through those cycles as well. There are times when we feel like we're on top of the mountain, where spiritually everything seems to be going well. And then there are other times when I feel in the valley. I don't enjoy praying. I don't enjoy reading the Bible. I don't really want to see or talk to anyone. And in the story that we're discussing today, we find a literal experience where Jesus and his disciples are on the mountaintop and then they are on the valley. And I want you to see how this goes. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. So imagine the scene. Jesus does not invite all the disciples. He selects this small group, this trio of Peter, James, and John, and they go to the top of this mountain, and literally they have a mountaintop experience where Jesus is transfigured. He is transformed. Some amazing spiritual transformation happens to him, and suddenly his ordinary clothes become bright and shining. And the author, using the language that they understand, say, well, it kind of looked like they were brighter and whiter than anything could be bleached. And on top of that, these two figures, these great heroes from the past, from the Jewish story, appear with Jesus on the mountain, Moses and Elijah, and they're talking with Jesus. Now you must imagine, if you were Peter, if you were James, if you were John, and you were privileged to see this moment of amazing divine revelation of who Jesus really is, who he really was, you might be thinking, wow, this is wonderful. We've wanted all our life to catch a glimpse of this, and here we are. We never want to leave this mountaintop. We never want to go back to our ordinary lives. If only we could stay here and just live here and be here, life would be perfect. And in fact, Peter says this exact thing. Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Peter was so excited. He was like, listen, we'll build 3 little huts for you, Moses, and Elijah. This is such a wonderful experience. We're willing to sleep outside, exposed on the mountain, and to stay here with you and Moses and Elijah, rather than going back down to the valley to deal with everyday ordinary life. Peter at this point has forgotten his family. He's forgotten his fellow disciples. He just wants to be here on this mountaintop. And certainly at times in life, when we're going through a good vein of form, when things are all happening, it can be tempting to think, man, I really hope things just stay this way. If only we could keep this moment, if we could keep this feeling, if we could always stay in this moment, things would be fantastic. Jesus declines Peter's request. Jesus does not decide to stay up here on the mountain because Jesus realizes that there is something more importantly, or more relevantly, there is someone in the valley who needs his attention, who needs his help. Well, they come down the mountain and they run into this situation. So imagine they've just had this amazing mountaintop experience. They are full with the glow of what has happened. And then this happens. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. Wow, what a just a bucket of cold water in the face. They've just been on the mountaintop with Jesus and Moses and Elijah, and they come back down the mountain, and what do they find? Church leaders fighting and arguing about who knows what. The disciples on one side, the Pharisees on the other side, and this great crowd around them just watching this argument. And in the middle of all of this, there is this man. And here's what he says. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." This man, even though Jesus was up on the mountain the whole whole time with Elijah and Moses and the rest of the gang, when this man brought his troubled son to the disciples, in his mind, he was bringing his son, his problem to Jesus. The thing about those of us who are in spiritual leadership, and even if you don't have an official position in your church, if you're the spiritual one in your family or your friendship group, you're the Christian, you're the believer, people come to you with their problems. In their mind, they are bringing themselves to God. And when we fail to help them because we are so caught up in side issues, in distractions, in debates and arguments with other people, people feel like God, not us, but God has let them down. And so he says, Jesus, I wanted help. I came to your disciples. They couldn't help me. Jesus responds by saying, how long will I have to deal with this unbelieving generation? He heals the man's son and the man goes on his way. But later on, the disciples, they reflect and they say, Jesus, why couldn't we drive out this spirit? Why couldn't we make a difference in this young man's life? And maybe they're expecting Jesus to give them some deep theological reason. Well, you have to understand this prophecy, or you have to understand this prayer technique, or you need to know how to say these words in this order. But Jesus doesn't say any of that. In verse 29, he simply replies, this kind can come out only by prayer. You see, the reason why Jesus went up on that mountain that day was not primarily to have a wonderful spiritual experience, to bask in the glow of his Father's presence, to hold conversation with Moses and Elijah and just, feel great about himself. The reason why Jesus went up the mountain that day and why he spent so many hours late at night, early in the morning in prayer and often on mountains was because he was preparing himself for those valley times. He was filling himself up so he was able to make a difference when things got difficult. Friends, the reality is that we don't get strength for the valley. We don't get power to overcome difficult situations in those moments. That power, that strength comes from the investment we have made in the good times, the time we have spent when things are going well, to connect with God, to pray, yes, even to fast, whether it's from media or from food, to spend time with God. This prepares us for when things get rough. It is not possible for us to have a life where things always go well. Things will not always be good. We will not always be on cloud nine. Sometimes things are tough. They are difficult. And more importantly, even if you're going through a relatively good vein of form, guaranteed there's someone someone in your circle who is not, and they are crying out for your help. It is in those times of prayer and connection with God that we are filled with power to meet the trials and the difficulties of life. May you be one of those who discover that power is not in simply basking on the mountain of divine revelation, but real power is in making a difference in the valley of the difficulties of everyday lives. May you be one of those who comes to discover that even when it seems that no one has the answer, Jesus has the answer. And may you come to follow God's own fool, for only the fools can tell. Believe the unbelievable. Come, be a fool as well.